Hi there, my name is Aubrey Garrett, and I have a daughter with autism. And a lot of people ask me, so how do you do it? You seem to be doing okay. You seem to not be depressed. You seem to be managing. How do you do it? And my answer is always God. It's not me. It's God working through me and taking care of me through some incredible acts of providence. So, what I want to do today is just share my story with you so that it can encourage you because you may not have a child with autism, but you have something going on in your life that is tough. And I want you to see how God has taken care of me and has shown up in my journey so that you will be able to recognize where God shows up in your journey and to believe and hope because God will take care of you. So, to understand my story, we have to kind of go back a few years before Finley was born. We lived in Houston, in the general Houston area. My parents also lived in Houston, and we were pretty happy. I liked living close to my parents, and then all of a sudden, my dad was let go from his job. It was a horrible situation. He was treated unfairly, but the bottom line was he was 55 years old and had to find a new job. That is not easy to do. He's an incredible man. He's great at what he does, but nobody, wants to pay for that much experience these days. And so it was hard. And the only job he could find was in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Houston and Cheyenne, Wyoming are very different. Houston is really hot. Cheyenne, Wyoming is really cold. I went to the grocery store once and I think it was a negative temperature outside. And that is something I had never done. When I first visited them, they were worried about paying the heating bill because they were worried it was going to be terrible. And so it was so cold that I literally put on 3 sweatshirts and was kind of cranky and said, I feel like a snowman. Can we please have some more heat? It was not an easy transition for them. It was not an easy transition for us, but God. Wait for it. All right. Then a few years later, my husband, who's a minister, he's a youth minister. His full-time job is ministering to teenagers. We decided that we needed to move to a different church for a variety of reasons. And God showed us one church. Now, my husband is very talented. He's been in youth ministry for almost 20 years now. At that point, he'd been in ministry for 13, 14 years. And so he had a lot of opportunities. There were a lot of places that wanted us. But we felt like the church in North Carolina was the right fit for us. We felt like it was exactly what we were looking for, and it was going to be a really great fit for us to be able to serve God together. So we moved to North Carolina when I was 6 months pregnant with Finley. Y'all, moving is tough. Moving with a 2.5-year-old child because I had a little boy named Jackson. That's tough. Moving when you're 6 months pregnant with a little boy, that's really hard. So that was a tough time in our life too. It was hard to leave the people that we had loved for so many years. We'd been at the church in Houston for 7 years, and we loved so many people, and it was tough, but we just felt like it was what God was calling us to do. And so we moved. We went to interview before we actually got the job, and I was about 3 months pregnant with Finley, and I was so sick. I was basically just nauseous the whole time, but we still went, and it was a great job. It was a great interview, and I remember thinking, um, what if we're coming here for a reason? Because you see, they have a special needs ministry. Not that many churches of Christ in the country have a special needs ministry, but this church has a special needs ministry. Now, at that time when we were interviewing and I was 3 months pregnant, I was absolutely terrified of having a child with special needs. I was going to be having Finley at 33, so that's a little advanced in maternal age, according to just the common norms and stuff. And so I was a little more nervous. And I remember having the thought when I was there, what if Finley's special needs? What if this child has a special need? What if this is why God's sending us here? Oh my goodness, I can't handle having a child with special needs. And I was terrified for a few minutes that God was sending us there because I was going to have a child with special needs. And then the 20-week ultrasounds came back and everything looked perfect, and I kind of forgot about it. Fast forward a few years later, and we find out that Finley has autism. Now, I was terrified that she was going to have autism, but I'd kind of moved past it and I'd moved on, and we were now at exactly the right place for my child. When we found out, the day that we found out, the special needs minister, her name is Melinda Oldham, she's one of the most precious people in the world. She got my call. She said, "What do you need?" I said, "I just need to talk to somebody." So she drove 30 minutes, brought me a coffee. Anyone who knows me knows that I love Starbucks. She dropped what she was doing immediately, jumped in the car, drove 30 minutes to come talk to me, brought me a coffee, and just sat there and talked to me, answered my questions, and assured me that everything was going to be okay. And I knew that as scared as I was, as frustrated as I was, I knew that it was going to be okay because God had moved us from Houston to North Carolina before Finley even came out of my body to put us in a place where we would be cared for and taken care of and Finley could flourish. Now back to that where I talked about my parents had to move to Wyoming and it was a horrible situation. Losing a job, being fired, laid off, take a package, whatever you call it. It's awful. I hope nobody ever has to go through that. But if you've been through it, you understand that it's just awful. But because this company was in the middle of Arctic USA, not really, but it's so cold there. Because it's not a super desirable location, they did special incentives for people to help them want to work there. So, I mean, my dad was just taking whatever job he could get because he needed a job. But because he worked there and they had these incentives, he got all this extra money that allowed him to retire early. So, right after my daughter was diagnosed with autism, I had a church family that was already experienced with special needs and was taking care of us and comforting us and encouraging us and just loving on us so much and taking care of her. Then my dad was able to retire early because of this job, and my parents were able to move to North Carolina with us down the street in the same neighborhood to be able to help more with Finley. Because it's hard. When you have a special needs child, it's hard. Having little kids in general is hard. Add on some special needs and problems with regulation and sensory issues, it's just tough. But God provided. The moral of the story is that God provided for us for what we would need before we even knew that we needed it. So sometimes I get nervous and sometimes I get stressed and sometimes I get worried, and I just have to remind myself God's not surprised. God knows what's coming. And God is the perfect Father, and He wants us to live abundant lives. My favorite Bible verse is John 10:10. The thief, the devil, comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Basically, he wants to destroy your life. He wants to destroy your peace. He wants to destroy your patience. He wants to destroy your hope, your comfort, your contentment. But it doesn't end there. That's only the first half of the verse. John 10:10. The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But I, Jesus, have come to give you an abundant life so that you can live life abundantly. Now, God didn't create this broken world that we live in. His plan was for us to live in a beautiful garden. Now, I think his plan was for us to be naked, which is not so beautiful to me, but he wanted us to live in a perfect garden where he could bless us and we could live in this perfect harmony with him. Sin entered the world, It broke the garden, it broke the people, and God's whole goal since that, his whole purpose has been to reconcile and redeem what was broken and to bring us back to a perfect garden where we can live in harmony and beauty with him and have an abundant life. So, whatever you're worrying about right now, just take comfort in my story and remember that God is already preparing to bless you and to provide for you because he already knows what's coming. Now, you can't be like the person that sat on top of the house and said, God's going to rescue me from this flood. I'm just going to sit on this house and God's going to come down and he's going to pick me up and carry me away from the floodwaters. But then somebody came by and offered him a ride in a helicopter and he said, No, God's got this. Somebody came by and offered him a ride in a boat. He's like, No, God's going to get me. Pay attention. Don't assume that you know how God is going to provide for you. I mean, honestly, back when I was worried that God was going to provide for me by sending us to this church, I was like, God, can you just provide a perfect baby instead? Can you? Because I don't think I can handle having an autistic child. My life is already too tough and already too crazy. I mean, I'm married to Jeremy. Come on, y'all. I don't think I can handle this. I need you to provide for me by not letting my child have autism. But God didn't provide that way. And we don't know how God's going to provide for us. So we got to be open and watching because most likely God's going to provide for us by sending us help in the form of other Christian believers and other people. And we just have to watch for that and be open to that and not be like, "No, I've got this. I can do this all myself. I don't need help." No, you can't. In the beginning, God made Adam, and then he said, It is not good for Adam to be alone. And then he made Eve, who I think her name means helpmate, helper. So in the beginning, God said, No, you can't do it all yourself. Don't try. You need a helper. Y'all, I need lots of helpers. And if you're watching this at our ladies' retreat that I'm making it for, you are so blessed because you have around you some incredible, amazing Christian sisters that are there to help you. Sometimes you'll help them, sometimes they'll help you. That's the beauty of the church, the ecclesia. We are a set apart sanctuary and a group that loves each other and takes care of each other and supports each other and can be God's hands and feet here on the earth while He's preparing that perfect eternal garden for us up in heaven. So I love you guys. I hope that this was encouraging to you. I hope that it reminded you that God is always with you. He's always watching out for you, and He will always, always, always provide what you need to be able to make it through whatever you're going through.